Have you ever heard the legend of a lost city, a final bastion of a fallen empire, hidden so deep in the jungle that it vanished from history for 400 years? This isn't a fantasy tale. It's the story of the last refuge of the great Inca Empire. History tells us that in the 16th century, faced with the ferocious onslaught of the Spanish conquistadors, the Incas fled. They built a secret stronghold somewhere in the impenetrable jungles of Peru, a place to make their last stand. But as the empire fell, the location of this final refuge was lost to time, swallowed by mist and legend. Centuries passed. Then one man, an American explorer named Hiram Bingham, became obsessed with finding it. Some called him a dreamer, others a madman. But Bingham was no dusty academic. He was tall, rugged, and possessed the relentless drive of a man born for discovery. He looked like a Hollywood hero and was irresistibly drawn to the mystery that had haunted the Andes for centuries, the lost city of the Incas. The world in the early 1900s was still filled with blank spaces on the map, and Peru was one of the most mysterious. It was a land of cloud-piercing mountains, jungles that consumed entire civilizations, and whispered legends of golden cities hidden beyond the ridges. To most, these were just stories. But to Bingham, they were an invitation. He was convinced that somewhere out there, high in the Andes, stood the lost refuge of the Inca kings, the final place where they defied their conquerors. The story of Vilcabamba, the city of their last stand, would soon consume his life. Driven by a potent mix of curiosity, ambition, and a burning desire to leave his mark on history, Bingham embarked on a journey into one of the most inaccessible regions on Earth, a quest that would lead to one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of all time. But before the glory, there was the legend, and the legend began with the utter destruction of an empire. The Inca civilization once commanded a vast territory stretching over 2,000 miles of South America, from the deserts of Chile to the Amazon jungle. Their capital, Cusco, was the vibrant heart of an empire of millions. Then, in 1532, the Spanish arrived. Led by Francisco Pizarro, they came armed with guns, steel, and an insatiable greed for gold. Within a few short decades, the Incas were decimated. Their temples were plundered, their sacred gold melted down, their gods silenced. Yet, not all of them surrendered. Spanish chronicles speak of a young Inca emperor, Manco Inca, who escaped into the mountains. He led his people in a desperate search for a new home, a new capital hidden far beyond the reach of the Spaniards. There, in the unknown valleys of Peru, the Inca survivors built a secret city, their final refuge. For nearly 400 years, it remained lost, a ghost in the jungle, until Hiram Bingham, a restless professor at Yale, decided he would be the one to find it and, in doing so, make himself immortal. His quest was about to change history forever. Have you ever felt like you were meant for something more? A pull towards the unknown, a desire to leave your mark on the world? That's exactly where our story begins today, with a man who had everything, yet felt he had nothing at all. This is the story of how Hiram Bingham III, a comfortable academic, became a legendary explorer. Imagine this, it's 1911. Hiram Bingham is a 36-year-old professor at Yale University. He's not struggling. Far from it. He's married to Alfreda Mitchell, the heiress to the Tiffany diamond fortune. They live in a massive 30-room mansion with their 6 sons, surrounded by every comfort imaginable. He was, by all accounts, a member of America's elite, but underneath this perfect, polished exterior, Bingham was restless. He lived in the shadow of giants. He was the third Hiram Bingham. His grandfather had been a famous missionary, bringing Christianity to the Pacific. His father had followed that same devout path. The weight of his family name was immense, and he felt a desperate need to prove himself, not with sermons, but with a great discovery of his own. He wanted his name in the history books for something extraordinary. But for years, he had no idea what that something would be. Then, everything changed. In 1909, Bingham traveled to South America on a research trip, studying old Spanish trade routes. It was supposed to be a purely academic journey, but fate had other plans. His Peruvian guide made him an offer he couldn't refuse, a visit to an ancient hidden site high in the Andes, a place very few outsiders had ever laid eyes on. The journey was a brutal test of will. As they climbed higher and higher, the air grew thin, making every breath a struggle. The slopes were so steep that Bingham often had to crawl on his hands and knees, clutching at rocks to keep from falling into the roaring Apurimac River thousands of feet below. It was a silver ribbon carving its way through a canyon of terrifying depth. After hours of this grueling climb, he finally reached a plateau. And there, emerging from the mountain mist, were the ruins of stone buildings. The place was called Choquequero, the Cradle of Gold. The sight was breathtaking. He saw perfectly carved stone walls, agricultural terraces clinging impossibly to the mountainside. It was the echo of a civilization far more advanced and powerful than he had ever imagined. In a letter to his wife, Bingham wrote that it was the most interesting place I have ever seen. That moment was his turning point. Standing among those forgotten stones, he had an epiphany. He realized just how little the world truly knew about the great Inca Empire, and how many secrets were still buried in these mountains, waiting to be found. He had arrived in Peru as a historian, an expert on the Spanish Empire. But he left Choquequero as something entirely new. He was now an explorer. As he stood there, gazing across the snow-capped peaks of the Andes, a line from his favorite poet, Rudyard Kipling, echoed in his mind. Something hidden. Go and find it. Go and look behind the ranges. From that day forward, Hiram Bingham's destiny was sealed. He was convinced that somewhere out there, beyond those mountains, was a city lost to history. A secret that was his to uncover. A discovery that would finally allow him to carve his own name into the annals of history, not as the son or grandson of great men, but as a great man in his own right. His quest had just begun. Back at Yale, Hiram Bingham's mind refused to rest. The ruins of Choquequero had ignited something deep within him, a curiosity that quickly burned into an obsession. He began spending long nights in the university library, his fingers tracing the fragile pages of faded Spanish chroniclers, texts written in the very era of the conquest. These old manuscripts were like portals to another time, filled with stories of adventure, betrayal, and immeasurable loss. They detailed the breathtaking rise of the Inca Empire, which, from the early 13th to the mid-16th century, had become the most powerful civilization in the Americas. Imagine an empire stretching for more than 2,000 miles from modern-day Chile all the way up through Ecuador, spanning the harshest deserts, the highest mountains, and the densest rainforests of South America. They were masters of their world. But the chroniclers also told the grim story of the empire's fall. In 1532, the Spanish conquistador Francisco Pizarro and his men invaded the Inca heartland. They were driven by a lust for gold and glory, and they brought with them weapons the Incas had never seen: guns, steel, and even more devastatingly, disease. In just a few short years, the mighty empire was crushed, its golden cities plundered, its people scattered. Yet, the story that truly captivated Bingham wasn't the conquest itself, it was what came after. He was fascinated by the tale of a young Inca emperor named Manco Inca. After a failed rebellion against the Spanish in Cusco, Manco Inca refused to surrender. He gathered his most loyal followers and vanished into the labyrinthine Andes, determined to rebuild the Inca kingdom in secret, far from the reach of the invaders. The chroniclers said he founded a new capital called Vitcos, a city hidden high among the mountain peaks. Later, he established an even more remote refuge, deep within the jungle Vilcabamba, the final, legendary city of the Incas. It was here, protected by impenetrable forests and towering mountains, that the last Inca kings continued to rule for decades. This pocket of resistance survived until 1572, when the Spaniards finally discovered and destroyed this last bastion of Inca power. Bingham was completely enthralled. For centuries, adventurers, scholars, and treasure hunters had speculated about the location of Vilcabamba. Countless expeditions had searched for it, but the jungle had kept it secret. No one had ever found it. To Bingham, this wasn't just a historical puzzle. It was the mystery that could make his name immortal. He began to collect every clue he could find, piecing together fragments from different accounts. The chronicles mentioned a great white rock near Vitcos, a sacred shrine close to the hidden capital. They spoke of journeys to days beyond Vitcos to reach Vilcabamba, describing rivers and valleys that required days of grueling climbing. By candlelight, Bingham studied old maps, sketching possible routes, tracing the contours of mountain ranges and the paths of forgotten rivers. Each clue, each mention of a landmark, drew him deeper into the mystery. He began to see the Andes not as an impenetrable barrier, but as a complex labyrinth guarding the greatest secret of the Inca world. His logic was clear. If he could just find Vitcos, if he could locate that great white rock, then he was certain he could follow the trail to the lost city of Vilcabamba itself. By 1910, the idea consumed him entirely. His university lectures, his family life, even his formal academic duties began to feel like distractions. They faded into the background, eclipsed by his singular, driving passion. Hiram Bingham was no longer satisfied with just being a historian who read about the past. He was determined to step out of the library and into the wild, to become a part of history itself. Hiram Bingham was now absolutely certain. He had found the breadcrumb trail leading to the last city of the Incas. But a trail alone wasn't enough. To conquer the Andes, he needed more than just his relentless determination. He needed a small army of men, a mountain of supplies, and a river of money. Let's be clear, an expedition into the heart of the Andes in the early 1900s was a monumental undertaking. Much of Peru was still a blank spot on the map. Its treacherous mountains and dense jungles known only to the locals and a few hardy traders. Bingham approached the planning with the meticulous precision of a military general preparing for battle. He mapped out every mile, calculated food rations down to the last bean, and compiled equipment lists that seemed to go on forever. This wasn't going to be a ragtag group of thrill-seekers. He needed a doctor, a naturalist, a geologist, and skilled topographers who could chart this unknown territory. He was building a team of scientists, not just adventurers. Why? Because scientific credibility was the key to making the world believe in his discovery. He didn't just want to find a lost city, he wanted to claim it for the academic world. But ambition has a price tag, and this one was steep. Funding was his greatest challenge. His employer, Yale University, could lend its prestigious name to the expedition, but it couldn't provide the massive amount of cash required for such a journey. So, Bingham, ever the innovator, turned his gaze to the giants of American industry. He appealed to their sense of adventure, and perhaps more importantly, their love for good publicity. It worked. The legendary Abercrombie and Fitch supplied state-of-the-art exploration gear and clothing. Winchester repeating arms donated rifles, essential for protection and hunting in the wild. And Kodak provided one of the most advanced cameras of the era, the very device that would soon capture the first-ever photographs of a world that time had forgotten. Even with these incredible sponsorships, the expedition's budget was enormous. The cost per man was estimated at $1,800. That might not sound like much today, but in 1911, it was a small fortune. Bingham went back to his network, persuading some of his old Yale classmates to invest in his dream. One friend agreed to contribute, but only if a Yale geologist was included on the team, a deal Bingham happily made. Others, captivated by his infectious passion, gave smaller donations. Still, he was short. The dream was teetering on the edge of financial collapse. So, Bingham turned to the one person who had always believed in him, his wife, Alfreda Mitchell Bingham. Drawing from her family's immense Tiffany & Co. fortune, she quietly and selflessly funded the gap. It was her unwavering faith that ultimately made the entire expedition possible. By the beginning of June 1911, the team was finally assembled. 6 men, each a specialist in their field: medicine, geology, natural sciences, and engineering, stood ready to venture into the unknown. Their luggage wasn't just clothes, it was crates packed with scientific instruments, food, tents, research notebooks, and of course, Hiram Bingham's boundless ambition. On June 8, 1911, the team set sail from the bustling docks of New York City, their destination, Peru. Their first stop would be the ancient Inca capital of Cusco, perched high in the Andes Mountains. From there, the real journey would begin. For Hiram Bingham, this was far more than a simple voyage of exploration. It was a pilgrimage into the realm of myth and legend. He was utterly convinced that somewhere deep within those imposing mountains lay Vilcabamba, the final, secret refuge of the Inca kings. He believed that if he could find it, he would not only unearth the last great city of the Incas, but he would also secure his own permanent place in the annals of history. The stage was set, the players were in position, and one of the greatest adventure stories of the 20th century was about to unfold. After weeks at sea and days of grueling overland travel, Hiram Bingham and his expedition finally rode into Cusco on July 2, 1911. Imagine stepping into a city where time itself feels layered. Cusco, the former capital of the mighty Inca Empire, was a living museum. Spanish churches stood defiantly on the foundations of Inca temples. Colonial palaces built over the ruins of a lost civilization. Yet, beneath it all, the spirit of the Inca lingered in every stone wall and winding alleyway. For Bingham, this wasn't just a destination, it was a portal to the past. He could feel the immense weight of history all around him. This ancient capital, once the heart of a sprawling empire, was now the launchpad for his greatest adventure. His quest for the lost cities of the Inca was about to begin in earnest. Bingham immediately got to work, immersing himself in the local community. He spoke with anyone who would listen, guides, farmers, traders, asking a single burning question: "Have you heard of Vitcos or Vilcabamba?" Most just shrugged, unfamiliar with the names, but a few, their eyes glinting with mystery, would whisper tales of ruins hidden deep in the jungle, high on mountains where only spirits dared to tread. Each story was tantalizingly vague, a breadcrumb leading into the unknown. On July 19th, the real journey began. Bingham and his trusted companion, a naturalist named Harry Foote, set out from Cusco, leaving the rest of their team behind to conduct surveys. The 2 men rode on mules, pushing deeper into the Andes. They crossed freezing rivers that stole their breath, and traversed high mountain passes, where the air was thin and sharp. They moved through misty valleys, where ancient stone terraces, built centuries ago, still clung to the slopes like ghostly stairways. Every step was a step further away from the modern world. Bingham was a meticulous record-keeper. His diary from this time reads like a great adventure novel, filled with both exhaustion and pure awe. As he entered the sacred valley, he wrote, "I had entered the marvelous canyon of the Urubamba. Here, the river runs through gigantic mountains of granite. I know of nowhere in the world that can compare with it." His words paint a picture of a landscape that was almost mythical. He described snow-capped peaks soaring miles above the clouds, a world of vibrant orchids and delicate ferns, and what he called the witchery of the jungle. He wrote of cliffs so high they seemed to pierce the heavens, and valleys so deep they swallowed the light. But this epic beauty came with immense challenges. The trails were dangerously steep, the rain was relentless, and biting insects were a constant torment. Yet, with every mile they covered, Bingham's conviction grew stronger. He felt it in his bones. He was getting closer. Closer to something monumental, something history had forgotten. After a grueling 70-mile journey through this breathtaking but brutal landscape, they reached a remote outpost called Manda Pampa, deep in the Urubamba Valley. They were surrounded by soaring green peaks and the constant roar of the river. It was here, in this isolated corner of the world, that a local farmer mentioned something that would alter the course of Bingham's life, and indeed, history itself. He spoke of some very old ruins, perched on a mountain ridge high above the valley. He gave them a name spoken in Quechua, the language of the Inca. He called the place Machu Picchu, Old Peak. Bingham had no idea that this name, which he was hearing for the very first time, would soon echo around the globe. Ever wondered what it feels like to stumble upon a lost world? Let's travel back to 1911 with the explorer Hiram Bingham as he camps in the sacred valley of Peru. Surrounded by misty cliffs and the constant roar of the Urubamba River, Bingham and his companion Harry Foote were settling in for the night at a place called Manda Pampa. Just as darkness fell, a local farmer named Melchor Artiga approached their camp. Bingham, ever the historian, was always searching for clues to the past. He asked Artiga a question he'd asked countless times before. Were there any ruins nearby? Artiga pointed towards the towering ridge opposite them. He spoke of ancient stone structures high up on two peaks, one named Huayna Picchu and the other Machu Picchu. Bingham was intrigued, but also skeptical. He'd been down this road many times. Local stories often led to nothing more than a few broken walls or scattered stones, long swallowed by the jungle. But he had also learned that legends sometimes held a kernel of truth. He carefully jotted down the names in his pocket diary, a flicker of hope refusing to be extinguished. What if this time was different? The next morning, July 24th, 1911, the valley was shrouded in rain. Artiga was hesitant to make the climb in such a storm, but Bingham's determination was unyielding. He offered the farmer several times his usual daily wage. The offer was too good to refuse, and Artiga agreed to be his guide. At 10 o'clock, Hiram Bingham began the ascent that would change history forever. The journey was anything but easy. Their first challenge was crossing the raging Urubamba River on a primitive, rickety bridge. It was so fragile that a single misstep meant a plunge into the icy, turbulent water below. Bingham later confessed that he crawled across on his hands and knees, terrified that the rising river would sweep the entire bridge away at any moment. Once across the river, the real climb began. The path shot almost vertically up into the dense cloud forest. The air became thick and humid, with tangled vines grabbing at their feet. The ground was a slippery mess of mud and wet leaves. For over an hour, Bingham and Artiga clawed their way upward, often on all fours, desperately gripping onto roots and rocks to keep from sliding back down the treacherous slope. Finally, drenched in sweat and rain, they reached a small, high-altitude clearing. Here, they found a few simple huts, home to local Quechua families who lived among the ruins, completely cut off from the modern world. And then, it happened. The jungle suddenly parted, and Bingham froze. Before him, a breathtaking sight unfolded. A great flight of stone terraces, perfectly carved and hundreds of feet long, stretched out like a stairway to the heavens. It was a city hidden in the clouds. He was utterly overcome with astonishment, realizing this was unlike anything he, or anyone in the modern world, had ever seen. Just as he was taking it all in, the rain stopped. Sunlight pierced through the clouds, casting a golden glow upon the terraces, making them shine against the vibrant green of the jungle. In that moment, Bingham knew he had found something truly extraordinary. It was a place lost to time, a secret kept by the mountains for centuries. He didn't know its true name or its purpose yet, but standing there, surrounded by the profound silence and the ancient stones, Hiram Bingham understood one thing with absolute certainty. His life, and the very history of exploration, had been changed forever. Hiram Bingham wiped the sweat from his brow, his heart pounding in his chest, partly from the climb, partly from anticipation. His guide, a young boy named Pablo Richard, moved effortlessly ahead, disappearing and reappearing through the thick, humid jungle mist. They were ascending a steep ridge, and as the vegetation thinned, something extraordinary began to reveal itself. Stone walls, almost swallowed by ferns and trees, emerged from the haze. Bingham's breath caught in his throat. These weren't just any walls. They were built from massive blocks of granite, fitted together with a precision that was simply breathtaking. He ran his hand over the cool, smooth surface, realizing that not even a knife blade could slip between the stones. This was Inca masonry, and it was perfect. They climbed higher, the scale of the place unfolding before them. Agricultural terraces like giant green stairsteps ascended the mountainside, seemingly reaching for the clouds. It was clear the Incas hadn't just built on this mountain. They had sculpted it, turning the peak into a symphony of stone and symmetry. Bingham felt a dizzying sense of discovery, as if he had stumbled out of the jungle and into a forgotten dream. This was far beyond anything he had imagined. Pablo led him to a cave beneath an overhanging ledge. Its interior was lined with finely cut stone. "A royal mausoleum," Bingham murmured to himself. His mind racing, just above it stood a structure that stunned him into silence. A semicircular temple, its outer wall curving with an elegance that mirrored the famous Temple of the Sun in Cusco. "It fairly took my breath away," he would later write. Everywhere he looked, a new wonder appeared. Temples, grand stairways, plazas, fountains, and homes, all intricately carved from the mountain itself. The stones seemed to hum with the energy of their creators. This wasn't a small, hidden settlement. It was a city. A lost, sacred city. From a high vantage point, he gazed out across the valley. Clouds drifted like phantom spirits around the iconic peaks of Huayna Picchu and Machu Picchu. Far, far below, the Urubamba River snaked through the canyon, a silver ribbon in the green expanse. Bingham stood there for a long time, simply absorbing the view. He couldn't have conceived of a more majestic or mysterious location for a city. It was a fortress in the sky, a kingdom hidden from the world for centuries. He had found something truly special. His exploration led him to a building with 3 large, trapezoidal windows perfectly aligned to face the rising sun. A shiver of certainty ran down his spine. This was a place of ceremony, of profound worship. Perhaps this was the last refuge of the Inca emperors, a place so secret that the Spanish conquistadors never found it. He didn't have a name for it yet, but he knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that this was the single greatest discovery of his life. That evening, back at his camp, exhausted but filled with an electric excitement, he filled his diary with every detail, writing that the ruins were as fine as the finest stonework in the world. But as the adrenaline faded, a nagging question began to form in his mind. If this city was so magnificent, so extensive, why was it completely unknown? Why wasn't it mentioned in any of the Spanish chronicles, on any map, or in any historical record? It seemed impossible for such a wonder to be so completely forgotten. The answer, he would soon learn, was as hidden and as shocking as the city itself. Waiting to be found, carved into the stone of one of its most sacred temples. As Hiram Bingham explored the mysterious ruins of Machu Picchu, something unexpected caught his eye. Carved into a stone wall of the Temple of the 3 Windows was a name, crudely scratched into the surface. It read, Lizaraga, 1902. Bingham froze. His heart sank. Someone had been here before him. For a man who had dreamed of uncovering a lost city, the thought was unbearable. Had another explorer already discovered Machu Picchu? Was he too late to claim the glory? He carefully copied the name into his diary and prayed that Lizaraga wasn't another academic or foreign adventurer. That night, back at camp, Bingham could barely sleep. His mind swirled with questions. If these ruins had been found in 1902, less than a decade earlier, why had no one in the world heard of them? Why no report, no expedition, no recognition? The next morning, determined to find out the truth, he set off to find the mysterious man behind the inscription. A local guide told him that an Agustin Lizaraga lived near the San Miguel Bridge, a few miles downstream. Bingham went there at once, but Lizaraga wasn't home. Instead, he spoke to his brother, Angel Lizaraga, who explained that Agustin was a local farmer, not a scholar, not an explorer, and that he had indeed visited the ruins years earlier while clearing land for crops. Relief washed over Bingham. The man who had carved his name into the stone was no rival, just a villager who had stumbled upon the site and left his mark. The discovery, the scientific discovery, was still his. That evening, Bingham wrote in his diary, with renewed confidence, Lizaraga is the discoverer of Machu Picchu. But deep down, he knew history would remember something else entirely. It would remember the man who revealed it to the world. Despite the magnitude of what he had seen, Bingham spoke little of Machu Picchu in the following days. He made a few sketches, packed his camera, and moved on convinced that the ruins were only part of a larger story. He still believed the true prize lay ahead, the hidden city of Vilcabamba, the Incas' final refuge from the Spanish conquest. Machu Picchu was magnificent, yes, but, in Bingham's mind, it was only a stepping stone on his journey to uncover the real lost city of the Incas. With the jungle closing behind him, he left Machu Picchu almost as quietly as he had found it, unaware that he had just changed history forever. Hello, and welcome back to our channel. In our last episode, Hiram Bingham stumbled upon the breathtaking citadel of Machu Picchu. But, for Bingham, the adventure was far from over. His heart was set on a different prize. Vilcabamba, the legendary last capital of the Inca Empire. He was convinced that the magnificent city in the clouds he had just found was not the one described in the Spanish chronicles. Those ancient texts spoke of a city hidden deeper in the jungle. a place of last resistance, 2 days' journey beyond another lost city called Vit. Driven by this singular goal, Bingham became a historical detective, piecing together clues from centuries-old manuscripts. He meticulously retraced the supposed routes of Inca runners and Spanish conquistadors, stopping in every village to ask the locals if they knew of any nearby ruins. The answers he received were often cryptic, pointing him further and further down the valley, into territories that even the most seasoned locals considered perilous. They whispered of lands swallowed by the rainforest, haunted by ancient spirits. But for an explorer like Bingham, danger was just another word for discovery. After weeks of arduous travel, his relentless spirit was finally rewarded. On August 9, 1911, his team arrived at a remote mountain shrine. Before them stood an immense white rock, gleaming under the Andean sun. It was a perfect match for the descriptions of a sacred stone located at Vitkos. The chronicles had led him here. A jolt of excitement ran through him. If this was Vitkos, then Vilcabamba, the ultimate prize, had to be close. He was on the very brink of solving one of history's greatest mysteries. With renewed vigor, Bingham and his guides pressed onward, descending from the high Andes into the humid, sweltering Amazon basin. The air grew thick and heavy, the jungle alive with the buzz of relentless insects. The path became a struggle against nature itself. The local people they encountered warned them to turn back, speaking of a cursed place ahead called Espiritu Pampa, which translates to the Plain of the Ghosts. They told stories of venomous snakes, debilitating fevers, and forgotten ruins guarded by the spirits of the dead. But these warnings didn't deter Bingham. In fact, the name only fueled his conviction. A Plain of Ghosts sounded exactly like the kind of place a fugitive Inca emperor would choose for his final, hidden stronghold. After several more grueling days of hacking through a seemingly impenetrable wall of green, the sharp ring of machetes against stone echoed through the jungle. The team had found something. As they cleared away the thick vegetation, the remains of ancient stone walls emerged from the forest floor. Vines clung to crumbling agricultural terraces, thick moss blanketed entire stairways, and the powerful roots of giant trees had split forgotten temples in two. This was clearly an ancient settlement, lost to time. When Bingham asked his local guide for the name of this place, the man answered with a single, electrifying word: Vilcabamba. Bingham's heart must have pounded in his chest. Could it be? Had he actually done it? After all the years of research, the months of treacherous travel, had he finally found the last bastion of the Inca Empire? The city where they made their final, desperate stand against the Spanish invaders. He had followed the clues, braved the dangers, and arrived at a place that bore the legendary name. But as he began to explore the ruins more closely, a shadow of doubt began to creep into his mind. He surveyed the site, his expert eye taking in the details. The buildings were relatively small, and the stonework was rough and functional. It lacked the exquisite, precise masonry that was the hallmark of royal Inca construction. The kind he had marveled at in Cusco and, of course, at Machu Picchu. There were few signs of the grandeur and architectural sophistication he expected from a capital city, even one built in hiding. This felt more like a remote outpost than the seat of an emperor. His disappointment is palpable in his own diary entry from that time. He wrote, after several days digging, "Ruins well scattered. Long, hard job to clear. Hardly worthwhile. He had come all this way, chasing a ghost through the jungle, only to find what he considered to be a collection of minor ruins." Utterly let down, Bingham concluded that this couldn't be the true Vilcabamba. He packed up his tools and turned his back on Espiritu Pampa, abandoning the site. He was completely unaware that he had, in fact, been standing in the very city he had spent so long searching for. In his mind, a new theory began to form, one that would shape his legacy and the world's understanding of the Incas for decades. If this jungle ruin wasn't Vilcabamba, then what was? The answer, to him, now seemed obvious. The true last capital had to be the magnificent, mysterious city he had found perched among the clouds. It had to be Machu Picchu. It was grand, it was remote, and it was perfectly hidden. Convinced he had solved the puzzle, Bingham prepared to return to America, ready to announce his spectacular discovery to the world, and prove that Machu Picchu was, indeed, the lost city of Vilcabamba. When Hiram Bingham returned to the United States at the end of 1911, he was exhausted but felt triumphant. He carried with him thousands of notes, sketches, and photographs. More importantly, he carried the unshakable conviction that he had found Vilcabamba, the legendary lost city of the Incas. At first, the world barely noticed. The discovery only earned small mentions in a few newspapers and academic journals. But Hiram Bingham was not a man who faded quietly into the background. He started a relentless campaign. He wrote articles for popular magazines, he gave lectures to packed halls, and he shared his incredible photographs of the ruins nestled in the clouds. The city the world would soon come to know as Machu Picchu. And those images, they were absolutely captivating. They showed stone terraces climbing high above the jungle, temples shrouded in mist, and stairways that seemed to ascend to the sky itself. It looked like something pulled straight from a myth. Bingham's eloquent storytelling did the rest. He wove tales of danger and discovery, of a forgotten civilization reborn. He single-handedly transformed a quiet academic find into a thrilling global adventure. The public was hooked. By 1912, with growing support, Bingham organized a second, much larger expedition. This time, he had the backing of two powerhouse institutions, Yale University and the National Geographic Society. He returned to Machu Picchu with a clear mission: to excavate and document the site in its entirety. Teams of workers began the painstaking process of clearing away decades of jungle overgrowth. And as they did, the city's true scale was revealed: grand temples, royal palaces, open plazas, and hundreds of agricultural terraces carved directly into the mountain. Bingham was stunned by its sheer vastness. From the highest points of the city, he could look out over the Andes, watching the clouds drift between the peaks. It felt as though the entire world had been built beneath his feet. In his diary, he tried to capture the feeling, writing simply, "Machu Picchu ruins as fine as ever. Very impressive." It's a classic bit of academic understatement, but you can feel the awe behind the words. The photographs taken during this second expedition were breathtaking, the first truly clear images of the lost city, and they were about to make history. In April 1913, National Geographic did something extraordinary. They dedicated an entire issue to Bingham's discovery. The headline read, "In the Wonderland of Peru." The effect was immediate and electric. The story exploded, spreading around the globe like wildfire. Machu Picchu was officially hailed as the lost city of the Incas, and Hiram Bingham was celebrated as one of the greatest explorers of his age. He became a symbol of courage, intellect, and adventure, the modern-day explorer who bridged the gap between science and legend. In fact, his larger-than-life persona would even go on to inspire a certain fictional hero you might know, Indiana Jones. But fame has a funny way of rewriting the truth. While the world was convinced that Machu Picchu was the final refuge of the Inca Empire, Bingham's interpretation wouldn't stand the test of time. The real story of Vilcabamba, and of how Bingham's discovery truly fits into the puzzle, was far more complex. And that part of the story would only come to light many years after his death, adding another fascinating layer to this incredible tale. For decades, the world bought into a grand, romantic story. Hiram Bingham, the American explorer, had found it, Vilcabamba, the legendary last stronghold of the Inca Empire. He called it Machu Picchu. The tale was perfect, a lost city, swallowed by the jungle, rediscovered for the world to marvel at. It seemed too good a story to question, and for a long time nobody did. But history is a patient detective. As years turned into decades, a new generation of scholars started to dust off the old maps and chronicles. They meticulously compared Bingham's notes with the accounts of the 16th-century Spanish conquistadors who had actually been to Vilcabamba. And that's when the cracks in the story began to appear. The Spanish chronicles painted a very different picture. They described Vilcabamba as a city deep in the low-lying jungle, a place of oppressive tropical heat, warm rivers, and swarms of mosquitoes. But Machu Picchu, it sits majestically high in the cool, crisp mountain air, nestled among cloud-kissed peaks. The geography just didn't line up. It was far from the Amazon basin, far from the sweltering climate the Spaniards had so vividly recorded. If Machu Picchu wasn't Vilcabamba, then where was the true last capital of the Incas? The mystery was wide open once again. The answer would remain hidden for another 50 years. Then, in 1964, another American explorer named Jean Savoy decided to venture into a region that Bingham himself had visited but quickly dismissed. An area known as Espiritu Pampa, the plain have the ghosts. Bingham had noted some minor ruins there but believed them to be insignificant. He couldn't have been more wrong. What Savoy and his team uncovered beneath the suffocating jungle canopy was nothing short of breathtaking. It wasn't just a few scattered stones. They found vast complexes of agricultural terraces, temples, royal palaces, and sprawling living quarters. The stone structures, many built in the distinct Latinka style, extended for miles. This was a city, a massive one. As they excavated, they found artifacts that directly linked the site to the final Inca rulers, including the last emperor himself, Tupac Amaru. The evidence was undeniable. Espiritu Pampa, not Machu Picchu, was the real Vilcabamba. This was the jungle fortress where the last free Incas had held out against the Spanish invasion. Bingham had been so close. He had walked the very same trails, spoken to the same local guides, and literally stood among the ruins of the city he was so desperately seeking. But, blinded by his focus on finding a city in the clouds, he had failed to recognize the truth right in front of him. But does this mistake diminish his legacy? Not at all. While he may have misidentified his find, Bingham gave the world a gift of immeasurable value. He unveiled Machu Picchu, a site of such staggering beauty and spiritual significance that it continues to captivate millions. Even if it wasn't the last refuge, it was something else. Perhaps something even more profound, a sacred royal estate, preserved almost perfectly for centuries, offering us a pristine window into the heart and soul of the Inca Empire. So, Bingham's quest may have ended on a note of historical error. But his discovery ignited a flame that still burns brightly. It inspired generations of explorers, archaeologists, and dreamers to follow in his footsteps. In the end, the world didn't just find one lost city of the Incas. Thanks to this grand, 50-year-long mistake, it found two, and both will forever be linked to the ambitious explorer who dared to chase a legend into the clouds. So, if Machu Picchu wasn't the final, hidden refuge of the Incas, what was it? This question sent historians and archaeologists back to the drawing board, and what they uncovered was a story just as captivating, if not more so. The evidence points to a different truth, a tale of imperial grandeur and spiritual retreat. Let's rewind to the mid-15th century. This was the golden age of the Inca Empire, ruled by the legendary Puchacati Inca Yupanqui. He wasn't just a warrior, he was a visionary, the architect of a vast empire that stretched from a small highland kingdom into one of the largest realms in South America. It was during his reign that Machu Picchu was conceived and constructed. So, what was its purpose? Modern historians now believe Machu Picchu was never a fortress or a secret hiding place. Instead, it was a royal estate, a magnificent country retreat built for Emperor Pachacati and his court. Think of it as an imperial sanctuary, a place for the emperor to escape the biting cold of Cusco's winters. Here, surrounded by breathtaking peaks and swirling clouds, he could commune with the gods in the very heart of nature. The design of this city in the sky is a masterpiece of harmony, blending power with deep spirituality. It wasn't built randomly. Every building, every agricultural terrace, every single stone was meticulously placed, often aligned with celestial events. There are temples designed to perfectly capture the first rays of the solstice sun, and shrines dedicated to the sacred mountains, the Apus, which the Incas revered as powerful, living spirits. Every element was part of a larger cosmic plan. Imagine the journey to get here in the 15th century. It wasn't a simple trip. It was a pilgrimage, an act of pure devotion. The steep climb through the dense cloud forest, the treacherous crossing of roaring rivers, and that final, breathless ascent to its lofty ridge was all symbolic. It represented a sacred journey, a transition from the everyday earthly world to a divine, celestial realm. It was a path reserved for the elite, a test of will and faith. Then, just as suddenly as it was built, it was abandoned. Sometime in the early 1500s, the bustling life of Machu Picchu simply ceased. The city fell silent. To this day, no historical records definitively explain why. The mystery has fueled countless theories. Some scholars believe a devastating disease, perhaps smallpox brought by Europeans, swept through the empire and decimated the population. Others speculate that it was deserted when the Spanish conquest began, its location so incredibly remote and inaccessible that the conquerors, for all their searching, simply never found it. For nearly 400 years, nature reclaimed its own. The jungle crept back in, a slow and silent takeover. Thick vines snaked over the magnificent temples, a blanket of green moss covered the grand stairways, and the roots of powerful trees pried apart its perfectly cut stone walls. When the American explorer Hiram Bingham stumbled upon it in 1911, led by local farmers, he found a city frozen in time. Machu Picchu had been hidden for centuries, untouched by the outside world, a perfectly preserved time capsule of Inca civilization. Today, we see Machu Picchu for what it truly was, one of the most extraordinary achievements of human ingenuity. It's a place where architecture, astronomy, and nature are fused together in stone. It was never intended to be a last stand or a final refuge from invaders. On the contrary, it was a vibrant celebration of life, a testament to royal power, and the ultimate expression of the Inca vision of harmony between humanity and the mountains. In rediscovering Machu Picchu, Hiram Bingham may have thought he'd found the final chapter of the Inca story, but in reality, he had uncovered perhaps its most beautiful, most awe-inspiring page. It reminds us that some mysteries, even when solved, only become more magical. Hiram Bingham's return from Peru was nothing short of triumphant. He was hailed as a hero, a modern-day conquistador of knowledge who had pulled the lost city of the Incas from the realm of myth into tangible reality. His name splashed across global headlines, his face graced magazine covers. In a world hungry for adventure, Bingham became the very definition of an explorer, daring, brilliant, and utterly relentless. But fame, much like the dense jungle he had trekked through, casts long and complicated shadows. Behind the thunderous applause, a storm of controversy was brewing. When Bingham returned to Yale University, he didn't come empty-handed. He brought with him thousands of artifacts from Machu Picchu, intricate pottery, finely crafted tools, beautiful jewelry, and even human remains. He maintained that the Peruvian government had permitted him to take these items on loan for academic study. However, in the years and decades that followed, many Peruvians voiced a different story, accusing Yale of plundering their national heritage. This sparked a bitter, decades-long dispute that would stretch for nearly a century, with the artifacts remaining in the United States. Yet, even with these arguments swirling, Bingham's legend only continued to grow. He eventually left the hallowed halls of Yale for the political arena, serving first as the governor of Connecticut and later as a U.S. senator. He became a respected public figure, a man of influence and stature. Though he would never again capture a triumph as monumental as his Peruvian expedition, it was as if the mountains had bestowed upon him his life's greatest glory, only to reclaim a part of him in the process. In his later years, Bingham watched as Machu Picchu transformed into a global icon, a symbol of wonder drawing people from every corner of the earth. Tourists started flocking to the sacred site, climbing the very same paths he and his small team had once struggled up. The arduous journey by mule over muddy trails was gradually replaced by the convenience of planes, trains, and modern roads. And yet, even with the influx of visitors and the passage of time, the citadel retained its profound and captivating mystery. Hiram Bingham himself was a man of fascinating contradictions. He was a scholar who craved high adventure, an explorer who yearned for public recognition, a dreamer whose ambition both fueled and blinded him. He may not have always been on the right side of history, but he was never a passive observer. He journeyed into the mountains searching for meaning and, in doing so, gifted the world one of its most extraordinary treasures. Today, when we speak of Machu Picchu, our thoughts naturally turn to the ingenious Incas who constructed it. But we also remember the man who brought it to the world's attention. The flawless stonework, the ethereal mist drifting between the ancient structures, the breathtaking harmony of architecture and nature, of these carry an echo of Bingham's discovery. He once wrote, "The sanctuary was lost for centuries because this ridge is in the most inaccessible corner of the Andes. Yet here, a highly civilized people built themselves a sanctuary for the worship of the sun." In that single, elegant sentence, Bingham managed to capture the essence of both the Incas and his own quest's two worlds, united by a sense of wonder but separated by the vast expanse of time. Though the true location of Vilcabamba, the last Inca stronghold he was searching for, ultimately eluded him, Hiram Bingham's journey remains one of the greatest tales of exploration ever told. He may not have found exactly what he was looking for, but what he found instead changed our understanding of history forever. In the decades after Hiram Bingham's death, Machu Picchu rose from a hidden sanctuary known only to a few farmers in a remote Peruvian valley, to become one of the most celebrated places on Earth. It was now hailed as a true wonder of the modern world, a powerful symbol of mystery, endurance, and profound beauty. The world had fallen in love with the lost city of the Incas. In 1983, This love was officially recognized when UNESCO declared Machu Picchu a World Heritage Site, cementing its status as one of humanity's most remarkable achievements. In the years that followed, millions of visitors began to make the pilgrimage. They came to walk its meticulously crafted terraces, to climb its ancient stone stairways, and to stand where Inca priests and royalty once watched the sunrise over the sacred peaks of the Andes. The secret was out, and everyone wanted a glimpse. But with this explosion of fame came new, urgent challenges. Tourism boomed, and the fragile ruins, built more than 500 years ago without a single drop of mortar, began to feel the strain. The constant foot traffic started to erode the ancient pathways. The delicate stones shifted under the weight of countless visitors, and the quiet echoes of the past grew faint beneath the noise of modern footsteps. Peru found itself facing a difficult question. How could it share its greatest treasure with the world without accidentally destroying the very thing that made it so sacred? The answer came in the form of dedicated preservation. With each passing decade, efforts to protect Machu Picchu grew stronger and more sophisticated. Archaeologists worked tirelessly to restore fallen walls, carefully putting them back together piece by piece, just as the Inca builders had. Engineers developed innovative techniques to reinforce the agricultural terraces, preventing landslides and ensuring their stability. And the Peruvian government stepped in, setting strict limits on the number of daily visitors. These measures were all designed with one goal in mind: to ensure that this ancient city would endure for many more generations to come. Meanwhile, another chapter of the story was quietly drawing to a close. The long-standing dispute over the thousands of artifacts Hiram Bingham had taken from the site finally moved toward a resolution. After nearly 100 years of complex and often tense negotiations, Yale University agreed to return the entire collection to Peru. It was a hugely symbolic act of closure, a moment of reconciliation for a story that had begun with one man's ambition and ended with a nation reclaiming its heritage. Today, Machu Picchu stands as more than just a breathtaking monument to the ingenuity of the Inca Empire. It serves as a powerful reminder of the fragile line we must walk between discovery and preservation. It is a place where human civilization and the raw power of nature meet in a seemingly perfect, impossible balance. Here, mist still drifts silently through stone corridors at dawn, and every sunrise feels like it's bringing the distant past to life all over again. For the many who make the journey, the experience is often described as spiritual. They speak of a silence that seems to speak louder than words, a profound feeling that the mountains themselves are watching over the city, timeless, patient, and eternal. It's a connection that transcends history. In this quiet communion between earth and sky, the spirits of both the Incas and Hiram Bingham seem to linger. He may not have found the lost city of Vilcabamba, the final refuge he was searching for, but in revealing Machu Picchu to the rest of the world, he gave all of humanity a timeless gift, a glimpse into a lost age of wonder. High in the Peruvian Andes, wrapped in mist and mystery, Machu Picchu endures a silent guardian of time. The wind still whispers through its terraces, the sun still crowns its temples each morning, and the shadows of the Incas seem to linger in every stone. For a place that has stood for over 5 centuries, it feels incredibly alive, a city breathing with the mountain air. More than 100 years have passed since Hiram Bingham stumbled upon this lost city, and yet its power to captivate us has only grown. It remains a powerful symbol of human resilience and imagination. Think about it. This is the story of a people who didn't just build on the land. They built *with*it. They carved their dreams into the very bones of the earth, reaching for the heavens from a mountaintop. They engineered a masterpiece in harmony with nature, a feat that continues to baffle architects and engineers today. To the Incas, Machu Picchu wasn't just a collection of buildings. It was a sacred bridge, a connection point between the mortal world and the divine, between the mountain below and the sky above. For Hiram Bingham, its rediscovery was the answer to a lifelong obsession, a find that would define his legacy and immortalize his name in the annals of exploration. And for us, the modern world, it stands as a testament to both the sheer genius of a vanished empire and the relentless curiosity that drives humanity forward, always pushing us to seek what is hidden beyond the horizon. As you watch the clouds drift through its ancient walls, you can almost feel the weight of history settling around you. You can almost hear the echoes of the past, the footsteps of priests, nobles, and workers who once lived and prayed here, their voices carried away by the mountain winds. Hiram Bingham described it perfectly when he said, "A highly civilized people, artistic, inventive, and capable of sustained endeavor, built themselves a sanctuary for the worship of the sun. Today, that sanctuary shines brighter than ever, welcoming thousands of visitors who come to stand in awe of its grandeur." It serves as a profound reminder that even in the most remote, seemingly inaccessible corners of our world, there are wonders waiting to be found. But the act of discovery isn't just about uncovering the past. It's about reawakening that spirit of awe and wonder that lies within each of us. It's about feeling small in the face of something so vast and ancient, and in that moment, feeling connected to something much larger than ourselves. Imagine being there as the final light of day fades behind the iconic peak of Machu Picchu. The great stone walls and surrounding mountains are bathed in gold, then shift to a deep crimson, before finally disappearing into the evening shadow. The city above the clouds falls silent once more, returning to its timeless, untouched, eternal state. It waits for the dawn, just as it has for centuries. Machu Picchu remains, not just as a relic of a lost civilization, but as a living echo of the universal human quest. A quest for meaning, for beauty, and for that eternal pursuit of the unknown that defines our very spirit.